us as humanity need to slow down and really be clear of the words that have been given to us. And if we're using them of not our own choosing, not our own volition, not our own definition, but it's just something given generation to the next. That's what generational curses are. A curse, we write in cursive. We spell. We are so powerful. The gospel is go, spell, speak life or speak death. What we say has so much power. And there is a consciousness that has been allowed to work for a very long time to co-opt our own sovereignty and our own ability to create goodness in this world by giving us a language set that perpetuates pain. And I'm here to wake people up, be very clear of what we do is a derivative of what we believe, and what we believe is only can either be first person experience or passed on by a third person.
What if the pain you've carried could become your greatest teacher? Imagine transforming the wounds you've hidden into pathways towards freedom, healing, and profound self-discovery. This powerful episode dives deep into the heart of breaking generational cycles of trauma and reclaiming our true power through vulnerability and inner child healing. Joining the conversation is Mack, transformational speaker and healer, whose life journey offers incredible insights into the hidden dynamics of unresolved trauma, the normalization of harmful behaviors, and the transformative strengths found in confronting our fears. Together we explore the courageous act of shedding shame, reconnecting with innocence, and stepping into a life defined by authenticity and unconditional love. This is your invitation to let the cycle of pain end with you, embracing healing as your birthright. So enjoy. Well, here we are again, beautiful souls. We've got another special guest for you. We have Mack. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm really honored to be one of the guests on your amazing podcast.
I'm excited. I can't wait to unpack some of the topics that we are going to be delving into today. So the way that we love to start the show, Lucas, is always asking our guests, what inspired you to do what you do today?
I've watched so many of your podcast guests. Usually people say, well, that's a big question, and let me start. And I'm going to do the same thing. That's a big question. And let me start with, I grew up in a really brutal home and experienced a lot of abuse in every category. I gave a TEDx talk in 2019 called Breaking the Cycle of Child Abuse. And even in the midst of it all, and I'd fly out of my body and hover over myself and survived in different ways like that. But I always, I'm here to search for what true love is, like not true love with romantic love, but like what is love and what is freedom and who are we and why do we hurt each other and why was I experiencing hurt? These big questions as a child I was wrestling with, and I went into religion, hard in religion. I mean, really, really hardcore into religion, and left that world really in pursuit of. In 2020, I did this podcast. I host a podcast as well, and I did this episode, Why I Left Christianity to Find the Love of God. And that set me free. I was like, I could breathe, but ultimately, I've always wanted to see the hurting get healed and for humanity to return back into that sovereign space where we're in the presence of love, the divine creator, and whatever that looks like. I know it's real. I've so many times in my life, I've experienced so much brutal, traumatizing pain and suffering. And if that's real, I know the opposite is real as well, because there is a balance. And so it's really led me on this journey of really understanding why people hurt people, how we can heal and ultimately return back to ourselves to reclaim our identity and our worthiness and who we are, and the work's led me a lot into helping men. It's been an interesting journey of helping men take the mask off. I had a podcast for many years called The Vulnerable Hero, whereas defining the word vulnerability differently, that, a lot of men, essentially, I'm 6'3", 240. I'm a bigger guy. And so, physically I have a big presence, but doesn't matter. I tell these guys, I've had bodybuilders and soldiers and all these different business, big players in business come to the retreats. And I tell them, it doesn't matter how big and strong you are on the outside. If you can't talk about whatever, whenever, with whomever and not get triggered, you're not strong. You're actually weak. And that's a weakness that you've tried to mask. And it all stems from our lack of being vulnerable and understanding what true love is. So anyway, is a long answer to a very simple question. Is what got me into it is growing up in so much abuse and seeking God, seeking truth, seeking love, see these big concepts, and ultimately finding it. But it wasn't in all the systems and the programs that were offered as solutions.
Wow, there's so much in there to unpack. Lucas, where do I go from here? The first thing that popped up for me is, why do people hurt one another?
Well, I think ultimately I had breakfast with someone this morning. And this, Catherine, I'm going to go to some serious places. I guess that's what we got to create. But I was talking about pedophilia and experiencing that. And I said, I really think to the very core that people are trying to reconnect with an innocence of what they once were and to feel that innocence. And unfortunately, there's a sickness that tries to touch what they once were, but it was taken from them, and they perpetuate this cycle. And that's in that one category, but I would say it's in any category. When people hurt other people, it's to solve a deep pain in the past that they were unwilling to look at, get raw, naked, vulnerable with themselves, and see it for what it was. And so they try to solve that pain in the past by inflicting that pain on another to see the reaction of another person. And people get addicted to the reactions of others or the power that they get when they had no power. So when we are in so much ego and it veils the truth of our soul, and then people start thinking that they are their egos, which is the narcissistic tendencies, that's why people hurt people, because ultimately we're on this journey to feel good. And if we don't look at the pain in the past and stop and draw a line in the sand and say, the pain stops with me. Doesn't matter if it kills me, it has to stop with me. It will not pass. I have 4 children. It is not passed to any of them. And it's taken me so much work, so much even self-suffering to go in and deal with all these things in the past. But until humanity understands that behavior is just an output of an internal belief system, and when we have been hurt and we are not taught we're not worthy of that hurt, and we're not taught that hurt was not of our own choosing and our own cause, but instead we're told we are the cause, we are to blame, there is something wrong, and there's no counter narrative to bring light into that darkness. Most often people cloud themselves with that pain and then go search to feel good, and it's in the form of hurting other people. So, the adage hurt people is just inevitable. It's water makes things wet. Pain perpetuates pain. But when we can truly drop our walls, I mean, to the exposure of death itself, and finally be in stasis with all that has brought terror and fear and dread and pain and all the suffering that we've experienced, that's when we can step through the veil that is so thin. Fear is such a thin veil, but it's opaque, so it doesn't let any light in. So we think it's so thick, but the courage to pierce through the light, the love, the beauty, the goodness, the virtue that's on the other side of that veil, then we can understand what healthy behavior is. And I really say that hurt people, but the opposite is true as well. Healthy people heal people. And it's just a matter of us, I think, finding the courage to stop and say, no more.
It's so true. And I can so relate to that. I think that a lot of the times well, most of the time we're always projecting our wounds, aren't we? But unconsciously, because the behavior is not the person. I always
Right.
say the behavior is what they think and feel. And therefore, if they're feeling hurt and they're wounded within that subconscious or unconscious level, they're always going to
Right.
project it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So how does one? Because I hear about it. I mean, not even to that degree, but I hear it even like on with relationships where we're constantly attracting opposites because they're here to teach us what we need to heal within ourselves, and
Mm-hmm.
because we're constantly projecting until we've learnt the lesson, and then we see them in a different light. And you see that quite often with parents, siblings. You can also see it, with relationships. So how does one become more conscious of, okay, yes, I am projecting this, but what now?
That's a good question. Part of part of not perpetuating the behavior is ceasing to use the language of the person that inflicted the pain. For instance, I ask people all the time, have you ever been hit by your parents? And they say, no, I've never been hit. And then I say, okay, were you ever spanked? And they say, yeah, I was spanked. And then I look at them like, what is spanking? What's the difference? Because I called one and one's not the other. It is an adult hitting a child for whatever virtuous wrapping that wants to be brought and packaged with. Ultimately, it's an adult hitting a child. I did any child come with that language set, or was that a language set given them and then we become adults and then we've used I'll just say abuser's language as our own language to justify our own self, in that we're somewhat okay, and because we're okay, what happened to us must have been okay, but it's not okay, because we would never choose to do that to innocents today. I mean, maybe some would, and I hope that's a very few, but the majority of humanity, which I believe are really good, we are so good. In fact, we get taken advantage of more often than not, that people understand our goodness, that we've used a language that has been given to us as opposed to saying, wait a minute, where did the epistemology of even that word come from? The epistemology of the word spank means to hit a horse to make a horse run faster. Religion wrapped it, and I know I'm just talking about essentially child abuse here, but this goes to any language. This goes to how a woman allows a man to treat her, how a man allows a woman. It relates to any relationship. I just spoke to 300 people earlier this week, and I said, in order to have a relationship, three ingredients must take place. You have to know someone, you have to like someone, and you have to trust someone. And I joke, I say, how many of you, raise your hand, know someone? Everyone should raise their hand here. Everyone raises their hand. I said, how many of you know and like someone, but you're not sure if you trust them? Raise your hand. Everyone's hand goes up. I said, what's sad is we have called that a relationship. We've allowed someone who's untrustworthy to call that a relationship. A real relationship is knowing, liking, and trusting someone. So what I really believe is how we heal this perpetuation of the pain and how we reclaim our sovereignty is ceasing to use the language set that was given to us by what they mean we should accept, and reclaim these words as, would I choose this for innocence? I start my TED talk, I have a belt in my hand, and I said, have you ever seen someone do this to a puppy? And I smack my hand as hard as I can, it hurt my hand, and I throw the belt on the ground. I say, sadly, that happens every single day. But I'm not talking about that happening to puppies. I'm talking about that happening to children. Just that interruption of that juxtaposition. It's ironic that if we saw someone do that to an innocent animal, people would call the cops, people would freak out. But we've accepted somehow, we've been conditioned that it's okay to do it to an innocent child. I think that's just one example I use of us trying, or us as humanity, need to slow down and really be clear of the words that have been given to us. And if we're using them of not our own choosing, not our own volition, not our own definition, but it's just something given generation to the next, that's what generational curses are. A curse, we write in cursive. We spell. We are so powerful. The gospel is go spell, speak life or speak death. What we say has so much power. And there is a consciousness that has been allowed to work for a very long time to co-opt our own sovereignty and our own ability to create goodness in this world by giving us a language set that perpetuates pain. And I'm here to, part of it is just to wake people up, to be very clear of what we do is a derivative of what we believe. And what we believe can either be first person experience or passed on by a third person. So if you didn't experience it yourself, do we really know? One of my favorite quotes, this old preacher, A.W. Tozer, he said, "A man with an experience is never at the mercy of a man with an argument." It's like if you experience something firsthand, doesn't matter what someone tries to logic away, it's true. And I think for many, we haven't had first-person experiences with truth. We've had passed down narratives of generations after generations, text after text, books after books. But having a first-person experience with freedom, having a first-person experience with what true, beautiful vulnerability is in the presence of divine love and light and goodness that is the ultimate gift that we can experience. And the only way we can get there is when we stop this current and this flow of what's been given to us by people that hurt us.
Yeah.
So another long answer, Catherine.
I love it. I love it so much. I was smiling because I actually wrote an article or a blog some time ago. Words are like spells. That's what spelling. Yeah. Absolutely. So I totally agree with you. The other thing, I was having a smile when you were talking about spanking, because we were having this conversation probably about a month ago about how things have changed and evolved over time. Like I remember at school, the teachers used to have the ruler and like whack us. Or throw the duster, like the chalkboard, like throw it across or it hit someone across the head. I mean, you would get done for if you did that today.
Yes.
Or even spanking. I remember my son came home once. I mean, he's 30 now, but and I'm anti-spanking, but that's just me because we were brought up very differently. And I'd love to hear more about it because there's some conversations have taken place about. Sometimes they need to be done, right, as is a way to regulate a child. And then I look at what cost. But I remember my son coming home, and this is years ago now, but he's like, now there's rules and regulations for all children that if they get spanked, like you said, if they get spanked by a parent, we can dob on them and they can get in big trouble. And I said, well, then I'm safe, aren't I? But just the fact that was something that was educated or something that was passed on at school was really interesting. But if you have a look at our generation, I don't know how old you are, but I'm going to say my generation.
Our generation, sure.
Yeah, our generation. Like, when you have a look at it, we've got, yes, we were brought up very differently. We were spanked, we were smacked, all of those things. It was part of it. It's almost like it was accepted. And even before our time, again, it happened a lot more, especially in men, because I remember the conversation was, well, it was the way to toughen up my sons, that kind of thing. So for me, I just like, where's the line? I mean, when I see a parent smack their child, I get triggered, right? Exactly like you said. As soon as you did the whole belt thing, I felt triggered. So, I mean, what are your thoughts around? Did it play a part once upon a time? Because if I have a look at the children today compared to us, we're very, very different. I think we're probably a little bit more skewed our age. Whereas the generation, like my son's generation, are very, very, very expansive in their thinking, let's say.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, first of all, when I share these things, I am not judging anyone that does it, and I want, because there is an automatic knee jerk reaction. I've talked to so many people about this, and there's this visceral response, and everyone has to choose what ultimately is right for them. And I'm also sharing though that, does a child want to be hit, or does a child want to be held? Even if we don't have the capacity in the moment to hold them, we might not. They might be terrible behavior. I have 4 kids. I'm not ignorant of how behavior is. And I know, given the two options, do they want to be hit or do they want to be held? I know they want to be held. And we have generational conditioning it's really hard to break. Sometimes I think, well, are we going to rise in consciousness, and can we get to this place that I really believe we are on our way towards anyway? And are we going to get there? And I believe that we are. I think these conversations are part of it, but in it being part of it, every individual has to take an account of what was done to me, what I do to innocence again. Period. That's the question. What I do to innocence, even if I justify it myself today, like, yeah, hit in all these different ways and tough it up. Like I used to, so I had flashbacks in 2016, which took completely shattered my world, completely tore me. I became almost etheric. I used to be grinded out. I was an entrepreneur. I had a very successful business, a published author, keynote speaker, did all the stuff, beautiful wife, 3 kids. But in 2016, I started having flashbacks, and I used to make fun, not outwardly necessarily. It's not like I ever liked making fun of people, but when I'd hear like, oh, they had flashbacks, or, oh, I'm sorry, you had something, oh, you're dealing with something, like, oh, boo-hoo, you don't have no idea what I have gone through, and look at me. That's why I kept justifying, like, it just made me tough until I started having flashbacks. And I described them as the movie Star Wars, or even the Marvel movies, that they show, like, you go to hyperdrive, you're in space, and all of a sudden, like, all the stars just flash. And I started, all my third person memories became first person memories again. And I was back in every scenario. And it was a really hard and scary, very sad integration of myself, because I attempted suicide at the age of 20, and there was like this before attempt, after attempt, and I never talked about life before that attempt ever. I never looked back. When I met my wife, I would just say, yeah, I had a rough childhood. I never would talk about it until I had my first child, and I didn't feel comfortable being around them. I could barely change a diaper. I couldn't bathe them. And that shame that I'd carry, I still want to talk about it. I just felt more shame. And then I would try harder in life. I would work harder. I would read more. I would try to be more articulate. And then I had my second child, who's a boy. And then I had more shame. And so I had 3 kids. I had never bathed them one time. I could barely change a diaper. And I share this to say, not that I was afraid I would do anything, but also it scared me of, well, would I do something, and what happened to me? And I couldn't yet go there until I couldn't contain it anymore. I started having these flashbacks, and it humbled me. It leveled me, but it also, it brought me to a place where I no longer wanted to defend or protect anything that I was or anything that I came from, because what I wanted truth, and I wanted to be free more than anything. I wanted to be free more than anything. When I say I went into religion, I had fasted. So I went into Christianity. I had water fasted from Sunday night to Tuesday morning every week for 5 years in a row. I prayed 2 hours a day. I had read the Bible, King James Bible, 7 times cover to cover in 14 years. I had consumed every doctrine, every Finney and Spurgeon and Wesley and all these. I consumed, and I was striving so hard to be clean. And actually, Gordana, who we talked about before the call, when I was talking to her one time, and I said, I've done all these things, and I still feel like there's this tar on me, and I can't clean it off. I can't scrub it off. I can't read it off. I can't pray it off. I can't meditate it off. I cannot get this tar, no matter how much I try to be clean. I can't get it off. And she goes, she's funny. She goes, well, your name means light bearer. I say, yeah. She goes, so you're the light. I said, okay, yeah. She goes, so just increase your light and burn it off. And I was like, okay. She's like, so find a dial inside you and increase your light. So I did. I found this dial in my power center and I just started increasing the light so much so that it burned. And I'll never forget, at this car that I had lived with for 38 years of my life burned away. And I was, what? Even right now, I feel just that amazing freedom of just, and what is that? Is that my conscious mind? Is it subconscious mind? Is it energy? Is it real? Regardless of what it is, when we try to break it down from the logical sense, there was a before that moment and an after that moment, and I felt free. And I share all this to give context of to answer your question about spanking and children, is that until we get clear in a place of what's free and true and good for ourselves and dissolve all the protective measures, well, my parents did the best they could. Well, your parents failed in many areas, and that doesn't mean they didn't love you, and that doesn't mean they didn't do their best. But ultimately, let's stop judging brokenness as the bar. Let us judge upon what is good and virtuous and pure and love as the bar. And then anything that falls short of that, let us aspire to bring that into us, not, well, the other hurt person that was hurt did their best to hurt me less. So that's one thing that I would say about spanking children. The other thing I would say, because there is no app, there's no bar of what is accepted. So it's saying, well, I hit my children because I love them and I want to discipline them. Well, how much do you love them? Then beat them to death. Well, that's absurd. Of course it's absurd, but you don't know where the line is. So if there's no line, how much pressure? Well, I don't know. Well, then it cannot be relative, because what we would apply to one should be applied to everyone, which is why love is the rule. The law of love is what sets us free. It's because it's love. It's not fear, intimidation, coercion, manipulation, threat, violence. None of these things have brought a world that we are swimming in like goodness. It's actually a very painful world. And I think until humanity realizes that the pain of staying the same will be greater than the pain of change, I think we're coming to this place that people are finally going to say, all right, I'm not going to defend what happened to me as virtuous. I'm just going to say it happened to me. And what do I choose for my inner child? What do I choose for myself? And what, if I was my 4 children, would I want done to them? Do I want them to be as tough as me? Do I want them to have no pain, like a high pain tolerance? No. I want them to be who they're supposed to be and the full expression of their soul's mission in this world. And so I think the spanking thing is a very, because it is so private and it is so pervasive. And I do think that the generations, it's interesting when you're saying that the schools now are saying, well, if your parents are doing this, you can tell them. I think that's when I say the dark consciousness has, because you have dark consciousness playing and abusing good people. Humans, I will say this till the day I die, humans are so good. We are so kind. We're so, a fence doesn't keep us from breaking into our neighbor's yard and taking their stuff. Like the goodness within our hearts does. We are good. So there's this consciousness that is here to provide a contrast in this 3D reality. And they are serving humanity by offering the duality, but they've overstepped, or we have forgotten who we really are. We talked about spelling. In elite families globally, in the dark conscious world, they teach people to read from left to right and right to left, because half the world reads from right to left and half the world reads from left to right. So in the Western world, we only think left to right, left to right, left to right. But in a higher conscious be it dark or light consciousness, you have to see from both. So what I say all the time is, what's the opposite of no? No backwards is on. So what we don't say no to is by default left on. What is devil backwards? Lived. What is evil backwards? Live. They know this. What is one pool to the next? So I bring all this up, and sorry, this is a super long answer, but we have to get to this place where we don't allow dark consciousness to create a system of brokenness, then indict the broken people from that broken system, and then indict them. I look at that as like this, well, you can tell on them. We have to say, no, you don't tell on people. You invite the perpetrators to heal. You bring everything to the light. You don't keep it and shame people. There's no shame. I talked at a conference a couple months ago, and I said the root of shame is shh, aim. You silence your aim. Your aim is to be direct in your communication and your intention. But where there's shame, it silences that, and we have missed aiming. And then we have self beat up and self perpetuating cycles of negativity. And so, to answer your question all about spanking and parents and what's happening right now, I think we have to first realize that it wasn't what we really wanted ourselves. What we really wanted was to be loved and held and listened to. And if that wasn't possible then, because our parents were working so hard or they were conditioned, well, that's why we have to draw the line in the sand now and do it now for our inner child, and then say, hey, it was me. I was this. I did this, but I choose it no more.
I loved everything. I love the words, actually. I mean, I do. As I was listening to what you were speaking about, there is a dichotomy at play, and we talk about it. I've got a positive psychology coaching academy, and we've got lots of students from all over the world. And it's funny when we talk about the dichotomy, it's to be understand that one cannot exist without the other. The difference is that we can be the observer, not be involved in one or the other. And so I feel like it's almost like this ascension or elevation that takes place. Because if you lean to, I remember at once, one of my mentors said, Catherine, life is like walking on a tightrope, tightrope. Yeah. You have one white bird and one black bird on either side of your hands. And the aim is to be the observer. They coexist. But as soon as you give attention or you turn your head towards one, you will fall off the tightrope, and vice versa. So it always made me, and that was in my early 20s. And it always made me realize that when we focus on too much is great and good, something has to come to create the balance in the opposite, and vice versa. So when you were talking about that, that was one thing I was remembering what a mentor once said to me. And then the other thing about parenting programming, I always say that our parents did the best they could with the information they had, understanding that they too carry wounds, that they didn't know how to heal, that were unconsciously passed on to us, which we then carry, not even consciously, because I mean Bruce Lipton talks about that, like it's passed on to before we're even born through the mother, so that then we do these things where we act out or play out unconsciously and expect a different result over and over again. But it really does go back to the inner child, because you as an adult, when you can understand, and I'm not talking about going back into the past, I'm talking about understanding your timeline, that every significant emotional event took you to where you are today. And not carry, because I think what happens is a lot of people do carry those wounds and keep talking about them, and so they keep reliving them, and the stories most of the time get bigger, and this is where we create our future, is in the present moment. So they get stuck in a loop. And so the inner child work is beautiful, because you can actually go, well, how can you see it without our eyes and give it a different meaning? Because I think that's it's the narratives we carry, and two, it's the meaning we give every situation. Every situation doesn't have a meaning until we give it meaning. And so I'd love to really understand what are your tricks to work with that inner child, for us to be more playful, joyful, the light side of what you talk about, that was within us, that exists with every single human being. How do we bring that to light rather
Mm,
than hang on to the pain and the wounds and allow those, which you can call that the dark aspects of oneself,
sure.
allow
Yeah.
those shadow aspects to play out all the time because they're on autopilot. These patterns and programs just play out all the time. So, what's our trick? Like, how do we bring that inner child out a little bit more to have more fun and play and to not take life so seriously?
Well, funny you ask that because I think I'm going into a deeper level of that understanding in this present process. But I will share that from my perspective, when I first um, met my inner child, part of my healing journey, emotional intelligence work, a lot therapy, and then I left talk therapy and went into emotional intelligence work, and then psychedelics was a huge part of my healing journey and sitting in ceremony and there's so many different beautiful aspects of reclaiming myself. But along that path, I met my inner child. And I'll never forget looking at my inner child and realizing that when he cried, like when I cried, sorry, he cried. And when I felt joy, he felt joy. And that we've always been one and the same. But I saw that he was tired and he was exhausted and he was outside of me. I am looking at him in front of me as he was outside of me, but there was just this pure unconditional love of me always with me. And it was in this moment that I realized that the greatest lie, in my perspective, coming from a religious home, was my purity. From what I experienced, my purity got taken away from me at a very young age. And that's part of where that tar that I couldn't get off, I felt dirty because of all the things that have happened to me. And, religion and especially the church likes to talk about sexual sin and all that stuff, but they really shame people for being human, which is ironic. Uh, but I'm only laughing just because they claim to love the human, but also they hate the human in so many ways. But um, when I met my inner child and when I realized that he was tired and he wanted to come home, and home was inside of me, home was my heart, home was me. I was the inner child's home, but I had been wearing this armor that was so heavy and so thick. And it's so in this moment of realization with my inner child, I physically took this mask off, this like Iron Man mask off my face. And I immediately felt like my jaw softened. Wow, I've been carrying so much pressure. And I took my breastplate off. I took all this armor off, like physically, like I'm doing it with you right now. I took it off and I'm still in the presence of my inner child. And I invited my inner child to come into my heart. And the minute my inner child came into my heart, like it, it's indescribable, but it was like light erupted like a nuclear detonation inside me, and it started to fill every cell and gene in my body, and I felt something that I've been seeking my entire life, which was to be pure. And it was I've always been pure. And what I realized, we've always been pure. Nothing can touch our soul. Nothing can touch us. But our ego, our body, the armor that we put on is protecting the innocence. And as close as it tried to penetrate me and touch that innocence, it could not touch that innocence. So that's more a heavy side of the inner child, but it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever experienced in my life, because that which I had always sought, the purity and the love and the light and the unconditional love that I had always been looking from an external system or an external God or an external concept outside myself, was waiting for me just to invite it back into my heart. And it was interesting. I use this narrative, even saying it now, invited my inner child back into my heart. Well, in Christianity, they teach you to invite Jesus into your heart. I'm like, oh gosh, that's really the missed teaching, is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the mother, the Father energy, my inner child. I am the Holy Trinity. You are the Holy Trinity. We walk around, but we've cut off our own child that is here to redeem those moments and years in life. And even in this present moment, the joy, the fun, the pleasure, to laugh as if we were never hurt, to love as if we were never hurt, to experience wonder as if no one would ever shame us for the questions that we ask, to to be innocent. And this concept, it might sound naive, and I think, and I don't know why I'm hearing critics in my mind say it sounds very simplistic and naive, but I'm telling you the experience of inviting our inner child back in. So Gordana and I have a course with the inner child work. It's beyond transformational. We do these meditations. I work with specifically men now, getting men to go through that same process, and they invite their inner child. And I say, tell them all the things that you've been wanting to tell them. And they just break down sobbing. And I'm like, one of the things I say is they want to come home, but they're not going to cross your will. You have to invite them back in. So they invite them back in, and that's a born again. I've witnessed real born again experiences. That's a born again experience. That from my perspective. And so the inner child, yes, the joy, I think my life's been pretty intense. I feel like even talking now, I'm like, man, I'm kind of an intense guy. My next phase of life will be the play. And I'm stepping into this right now. Apart from, like, I've had plant medicine help me. I know where the North Star is. I know what the bar is. And like, now to integrate that, I think Ram Dass said, when he started and he was in, the psychedelic world, and then that was like the bar that he just knew to meditate and go to that place. And I feel like that, as I've maturing in this journey, to reclaim all those times. I didn't have a childhood, and I think most people didn't have a childhood. And then we have children and we live vicariously through them, and then we stop their childhood. And so it's this big reclamation. And, it's the Bible. I'll reference it because I've read it so many times and can recite it. When Jesus says, unless you become like a little child, you may not enter the kingdom of heaven. And on a meditation one time, in fact, I have a painting that a viewer of my podcast right here, this triangle pyramid at the base of a sun, because I say in this podcast, I was on a meditation and I heard one time, oh, heaven is a conjunction word. Heart, Heart, and even, Even. Heaven is a balanced heart. And unless we become like a little child, we can't experience the balanced heart, the peace, the purity, the innocence, the wonder, the joy, the exploration, the magic that we are. I say often, even the Satanic Bible talks about mega, and in the Christian Bible talks about mega. They just call them the magi because magi is plural for mega, and you have the three magi that bring the gifts. She's like, the world's talking about magic in every layer. And then you have Trump come out and get the world chanting mega, even though they say it's make America great again. I'm like, no, the world is waking up to this magic again. And we are magical and we are beautiful. And I think what's to follow is the childlike wonder and the healing the inner child. And so I guess this to vulnerably say to you, the joy and that's what I'm ready for, the play. And I'm still working through these layers myself.
Oh, I love that. We do a lot of shadow work at our academy. So we do a whole big piece on inner child. And I really believe that the more that we do the inner child work, the more light, the more ascension that will take place, the more expansion and the lift of consciousness that will take place as a collective. So I'm really big into the inner child work, which I love. I'd love to, you mentioned before a piece about trust, which I love because I think that trust is such a big word, right? Because, I also ask 3 questions. Who trusts everybody? Hands up. And I'm one of those. And then who trusts everybody until proven wrong? Because it's like, so they'll, give them a certain limit of trust. And then who doesn't trust anybody, right? So there's different levels of trust. And it's okay not to trust. I mean, because it goes back to you 100% trust this individual. We might talk about siblings, parents, whatever that may be. And then they might go, no, because every time I tell my parent one thing, they're going to tell my sister or my brother, and then it gets passed on. So it's really an interesting concept because when we've experienced trauma, and I'm saying trauma because trauma is such a big word that's thrown around these
Yes.
days. But let's say
Yeah.
trauma with a little t, or trauma with a little, or a big T, because even abandonment, being left at
Yeah.
somebody else's house
Yes.
is trauma for one person.
That's right. That's right.
So how do we then, from a trust perspective, because I know that this, we talk about the different attachment styles, and I obviously that depends on the kind of childhood experience that you've had. I mean,
Yes.
how do you undo the stuff that you've experienced to then be in the present moment and then say, I am worthy of this relationship, or I'm worthy of this money, or I'm worthy of whatever that may be? How do you do that?
Mm, great question. So I think the first part of that is when I went to this emotional intelligence program that literally saved my life. I didn't trust anyone. I was always the guy sitting my back to the wall because I had been hurt and attacked and in so much pain. I didn't trust anyone in the system that I grew up in. And I was told growing up, there's no one we can't get to. There's no one we can't get to. And I saw it play out and that scared me. And I was constantly scared. So I was not safe anywhere. So anyway, I did not trust anyone, but I went to this emotional intelligence program and they had us sit knee to knee with a partner. You had to pick someone that triggered you. And I look around, no one really triggered me. This little blonde gal picks me and I reminded her of some person that did something to her, but we're sitting there knee to knee and we're not supposed to say one thing. We're just supposed to look at them in the eye and connect with that other person. Well, I'm sitting there and my face is contorting. I'm like, I'm so uncomfortable. I'm like, you know, my face moving. I'm smiling. I cannot just sit there. And the trainer came around and he's mic'd up. So he's talking to 80 people in this room. And he said, why can't you just sit there and see the other human being? They've done nothing to you. They've never hurt you. They've never lied to you, that you've never met this person. And you here are reacting the way you're reacting, not because of what they've done to you, but what you're bringing to this encounter. And he said, it's not, and this is what changed my whole perspective on trust. I learned that I can be a trusting person, but not everyone is worthy of my trust. And I can be a loving person, but not everyone is worthy of my love, meaning there's some people that are just not trustworthy. And I would just not be blindly like, hey, let me tell you everything about whatever. And before I just wouldn't say anything to anyone and I would just be walled up. That, for whatever reason, whether that resonates with you or not, it resonated with me that, okay, I want to be trusting. I want to be open. I want to be vulnerable. I want to be walking in the light. And I do know that there are people that are not worthy of me placing my trust in them. And that's the difference between trusting and giving someone a very innocent or very intimate part of oneself. So that's one part of the answer, I guess, of trust. But the other part is, I don't think we've been taught trust. We know what trust is. We know when we can't trust someone, but we haven't been taught really how to be trustworthy, how to be a vault, meaning that when someone says something, it goes in and doesn't go anywhere. And that's of a high virtue. And that's something to aspire to. And again, I'm going to use a verse that's interesting in the Bible because I always thought it just meant say what you mean, but there's this verse that says, let your yea be yea and your nay be nay, or let your yes be yes and your no be no. And I always just thought it meant say what you mean. But upon meditation one time of that verse, I said, oh, that's not what it means. It means what you say, let it be. Let your yes be in reality, fulfillment, the yes. And your no be it. So when you say it, you have to fulfill it, even if circumstances and all things come and try to get you off that path. Because ultimately, if we can't trust ourselves, we can't trust that the world is good. That's why healing oneself heals the world, is because I can't go out and heal the masses, but I can heal myself. I can do the work. And then when I heal, someone else feels safer that they can heal. And the ripple effect is um, so beautiful. And I used to ask I'm just giving this context. I don't know if this is right or wrong, but it's coming to mind. So I'll share. But um, when I was in ministry, there's this verse in the Bible, it's very popular. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not into your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path. And so often it's, well, do you trust God, or do you trust the universe, or do you trust? But I flipped it and I was like, man, could God trust me? Do I trust me? Like, would I buckle under pressure? Who am I as a person? And I think that question, if we're taught what trust is and we're taught how to be trustworthy, it would start with, do you trust yourself? And I think the answer, if most people are honest, is they don't trust themselves because they don't know how to trust themselves, because they've been violated or I'm so glad you brought up abandonment as trauma, because I have a horrific story, and in my TED talk I tell 1%, like barely. I don't even tell the details because that wasn't the point of talking about the details, but I have a really horrific story. But I said, what I went through is equal to the person who wasn't held or hugged or was abandoned, or maybe their parents just never told them good job, whatever. Every person's trauma affects every person equally. And what holds us back is comparing, well, I didn't go through that, so I should just suck it up, or man, they had it. No, our souls uniquely came in and experienced something that held our soul back from full burst expression of what it was meant to be. And so I'm so glad you brought up the abandonment, because that could be the most traumatic thing, equal to all the other categories. And when we stop judging and comparing ourselves, we will set ourselves free. So I think we need to teach ourselves how to close out all the noise, all the narrative, all the projections, all the shame, all the teachings, all the doctrines, all, like literally everything, go into the abyss, almost like Neo in the Matrix, where he's in that, it's just white. And in that is all possibility of knowing oneself, and then start unpacking. So trust is everything, but trust starts with ourself. And can we trust ourselves?
I so agree with you, because the other thing too is that when I actually, a lot of the stuff that I do is in corporate, and I have done for 30 years, work with leaders. And we talk about body language, which is 55% of our communication. And so if you don't trust others, they're picking up on what you're putting down with you without you even saying anything. And then you're wondering why you can't influence them, or you can't, you're not having an engaged team. So then it goes back to, how do you build that trust so that you can be influential and you can engage other people? And it does start with the self. And so do you trust yourself? Even I will share, like, do I trust myself 100%? No, I can't tell you how many times I said, starting Monday, I'm going to start running. Starting Monday, I'm going to start doing yoga every day. It's just, I let myself down over and over. All these little things, I am showing myself that I can't trust myself. So how is it that we show up for ourselves so that the trust, and it's like muscle. I believe that if you've been doing this for a long time, which I am a recovering people pleaser. And also I am also there for everybody else. So I will be the first to let myself down. And then asking the question, do I trust myself? No, I don't. So it does start with you 100%.
Yeah.
Lucas, I am conscious of your time. Is there a question that I haven't asked you in this interview that you would like to share with our audience before we go into our 3 shiny gold nuggets?
I think it's a good question. I think one of the things that the world is, we're in such a beautiful spot, I believe, as humanity right now. And I've on Twitter, which I spend a lot of time, or X now, which, by the way, I think the X is intentional, that, you know, the Generation X was in the US, in the United States, was the 13th United States generation where they coined the term Gen X. But I think we're at this spot right now in humanity where we're everyone gets what they choose because the karmic law is real and beautiful and we get to experience what we choose. And why I bring all this up is that I see, you hear the term the matrix is the red pill or the blue pill, but you said the most beautiful thing is that the observer takes no pill. And there's a lot of black pilling going on right now. And I guess it's not a question, but my encouragement to everyone is don't take the black pill. Don't take any pill. Just observe. You said it. Just observe. One of my closest teachers and friends is one of the most beautiful Hasidic rabbi spiritual leaders I've ever had the opportunity to study with and learn with for 5 years. And he asked me one time, said, Lucas, have you ever seen a bird fly with one wing? I go, no, I've never seen a bird fly with one wing. He said, exactly. It takes two wings to build tension, and in the tension comes the lift. I feel like we're in this tension spot, call it the X, call it whatever, and just to stay in this space because love is on the other side of fear, healing is on the other side of pain, and consciousness is bringing us forth to all this experience right now. So you didn't ask, that's not a question, but it's one thing I just wanted to encourage people is don't let your heart be troubled and don't keep hope because without hope, humanity does very sad things. And so just to stay hopeful.
I love that. And I'm so with you. I believe like from a soul perspective, because you mentioned about as a soul, we come here to experience in this human vehicle, but the soul doesn't judge. It doesn't say good or bad. That's why you might look at this timeline and go, oh, and it might be, like quite traumatic, but you go, that looks like fun. Because there's no judgment with the soul, right? And this is where it's really important that yes, understand that there's duality at play, and for us to just be, and that's why we're human beings, just to be in the center and observe, but not participate in either. Because it's like I hear people go, oh, we're light workers, and if we really follow in this, we're going to help get rid of all the darkness in the world. And I'm like, well, you're actually feeding that because you think that you're bringing more to that
energy. Yeah.
And so we're constantly manifesting, creating, because we are co-creating. So if you, whatever rabbit hole you're in, understand that you are participating in that creation. Yes. Whereas as the observer, it's a completely different energy because absolutely the change comes from within. So the less that we go left or right, the more that we stay within and, stay within our center, and that center is the heart. That's right. That's where change, really, really will start taking place, which I think it's what you're saying. We're in a beautiful place right now, Lucas.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. We really are. And, your podcast and so many beautiful souls are bringing, it's incredible. The platforms, the reach, the message, the ripple effect, the one idea sparks one behavioral change, which sparks a ripple effect that it never goes away. I heard this person ask the other day, when you speak a word, where does it go? It never stops. The impact of the words never stop. It's somewhere creating something right now. And I thought that's such a beautiful concept that we can be loving, kind, beautiful, joyous, expressive, creative beings in this world. And we don't have to look to the left. We don't have to look to the right. Even those constructs are for us to choose anyway, and we can choose ourselves. And I think that's what we're coming back to ultimately. And that's why I think what I've talked about, the spanking, all that stuff, is we're choosing ourselves maybe for the first time in a very long soul journey of learnings. It's time for us to choose ourselves. If you don't mind, I'll share one thing real quick
go for it.
I was at a retreat one time and I was in this meditation and I get brought up and I'm next to God, whatever that looked like. I couldn't see God. I wasn't looking at God, but I felt like God to my left told me to look down, and looking down, I was a mile in the sky. I don't know. I was so high up. But what I saw were conveyor belts, as far as I could see, conveyor belts that went all towards this light in the middle. So I saw all these rows, they all went to the center. And on the conveyor belt were all these bodies. And each conveyor belt was a generational line. So all the ancestry. And I was shown, or I was, because I think what I was meditating was, when did the law of free will start? Did it start when I exited my mother's womb and I took my first breath? Was that free will? I don't think so. I didn't choose what happened to me in my home as a child. So I was trying to understand and wrestle with this concept of free will and choice and 3D and duality and all the things that we are in this realm having fun with. And in this meditation, and when I got brought up into this vision and I saw all the conveyor belts, I saw that God asks each soul, which body do you want to jump into? And in this moment, I saw that if I jumped into this body, the ripple effect, not just of my generational line, but all the conveyor belts, it created ripples, that no one soul jumping into a body was isolated from impact to all other souls. And I was shown that the stillborn child, the soul that jumps into the stillborn, perhaps impacted the nurse in a way how the parents responded. Then the nurse then goes and changes the trajectory of her life. Everything has positive impact. And I saw that my dad chose to play the devil so that I could bring forth the light. And I thought, God, that is the ultimate offer of love. Even though I forget and we forget in the veil and we're in this realm, that I realize that yes, our souls have chosen everything. And it's not that it's what is good and what is bad. Yes, there are things to be called, there are momentums that pull us to one duality or the other. There is evil, which you read right to left, but if you read left to right, there is live. Of course, we can choose where our intention goes energetically, but we are here in this great cosmic game to experience all that this life has to offer, all the pain, all the pleasure, all the joy, all the wonder, all the fear, all the anxiety, everything that exists. Ultimately, I believe for us to come back and choose ourselves and reclaim all our ancestral line that got diluted, all the soul fragmentations, everything, all these different disciplines and teachings and things, regardless of how the language we want to use, to call all that energy back in so that we can stand as sovereign beings at the end and say, look at what, can you believe it? Like, man, I experienced this and that and this and that. I mean, in this doctrination, I was born with this. And ultimately, we bring it all back to source. And that is, I think, a beautiful. I would watch a movie of that that's the hero's journey. Is what I'm really sharing, is that we are the heroes of our own story, and we don't have to give away our power, our sovereignty, our worthiness, our intellect, our consciousness, or our ideas to anyone else. We as individuals can bring it all back into ourselves and share with one another in love and humility, and we only have more fun together. And so I just wanted to share that you were talking about the soul jumping in, and I don't know, it's brought great peace that the law of free will has always existed because it's the law of love, and ultimately our souls get to choose this life.
I'm going to say amen to that. I loved everything you just said. I love it. So the way that we wrap up the show, Lucas, is we always love to ask our guests to leave our audience with 3 shiny golden nuggets. So what would be those 3 shiny golden nuggets that you would like to leave for our audience today?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me on. It's such an honor, and your just energy is so beautiful, and I really appreciate you. And even asking this is that I think that one thing that's really important is to know the difference between fear and anxiety. And fear invites action and is external. So, for instance, I hear people say, fear is good because it can keep us alive. Well, yeah, if a predator comes, yeah, that fear gets you out of there. But anxiety is a vibration that is created by our greatest fear that hides in the shadows. So anxiety actually takes over our bodies and is a frequency that keeps us stuck. And it only comes from the fear we're unwilling to look at. And so pharma will say, oh, that anxiety, let us give you something, or whatever industry to mask and numb the anxiety, because anxiety is terrible. It used to be like you, I love you're saying a recovering people pleaser. I was a prolific people pleaser, but I had so much anxiety as well, coupled with that. And I would bite my nails, and I was living in so much dread and anxiety all the time. Well, it was because I was unwilling to look at the truest fear, the greatest fear. And so I just wanted to share that when we can get clear on the difference between fear and anxiety, yes, anxiety stems from fear, but it's only a vibration that is produced from that fear we're unwilling to look at. And ultimately, the only way to look at it is courage. Courage is the most I think, and I'm going to say this is an absolute, it's the most undertaught, ignored virtue in all of society is courage. In the US military, the highest honor they give soldiers on the battlefield is the Congressional Medal of Honor for courage on the battlefield. Courage is everything, and it's being afraid. None of us are void of fear. It is being afraid. It's saying, I acknowledge fear. This is the scariest thing. I might die if I look into my past. I might. And the answer is yes. But on the other side of that is all the freedom, all the love, all the joy, everything that you've ever wanted. It's on the other side of fear. And it takes, this is why I say in my TED Talk that I redefine vulnerability as having the courage to experience love in its purest form. So courage is what unlocks the door to get rid of the anxiety that you can identify the fear. And the last thing I just want to share is when I was in religion, I've always been a truth seeker. I will always be a truth seeker. I love truth. I love seeking. I love being a seeker of seeking. I love always being on the journey. But when I was in religion, the concept of truth, and especially Christianity, the concept of truth was such a prevalent narrative of, and Jesus, there's a saying that you shall know the truth and the truth shall make you free or set you free. And so I was always in pursuit of truth. But what I really wanted was love. And it wasn't until I went to this emotional intelligence program where, for the very first time in my life, I experienced unconditional love. People said, what's the most painful memory and experience of your life? Say it, get it out of you, scream, cry, yell, whatever you have to do, get it out of your body. Say it. We're not going to judge you. Even if you've done something horrible, we won't judge you. Say it. And the freedom that came from when I said what I thought was my darkest truth, and no one judged me. People started crying themselves and all the things. I breathed oxygen for the very first time in my life. I was like, and it really, and it was so transformational that I had to ask, oh, what, I'm always breaking things down. Like, well, what was that? Why did I experience such freedom? And it's never changed. I'm still breathing oxygen to this day from that very specific moment when they said, well, what else do you want to say? And I realized that truth will not come on its own. Truth cannot come on its own. Truth is a result of love. That where love is present, truth will inevitably come forth, resulting in our personal freedom. Yes, does truth make us free? Yes, but only by love can truth come forth. So it is so important for us, to face our fears and understand the anxiety and have the courage to do that. But we can't do that in an environment of judgment and shame and scolding and opinions and family structures and all the stuff that keeps us stuck. If we want to get free, we have to go seek a place where there's unconditional love. And sometimes that's just by being by ourselves. That's sometimes going to a workshop or working with you or, finding those spaces. But ultimately knowing it doesn't matter how much truth that we think we're finding, we're not going to be free until we're in the presence of unconditional love. And in that place, I say that, in the US, they talk about Groundhog's Day. If the groundhog sees a shadow, there's going to be more, more winter. Well, I say truth is like a groundhog. It wants to come out. We have an innate desire to express and tell our story and share our truths. But truth is like that groundhog. If it sniffs any judgment, any, well, I think, or someone saying, well, you should have, or any judgment, it's going to burrow down deeper and deeper and deeper. And sadly, some people have had it burrow down so deep, they've forgotten their own truth and they've lived to people please. They've lived the conditioning of their ego where it's so opaque. There's no light going in and there's no light going out. And love breaks the spell. And that's, I think, I just want to lead people with that is Gordana. I shared this on when we first became friends. I'm talking about Gordana Burnett, everyone listening, and really one of my closest friends. And I told her, and we say this in the course, I asked her, you know how you can know if something's true or not? She was like, how? I said, if you can breathe more deeply. Like, that's how. I don't need someone to tell me what's true. I don't need, oh, this is the truth. Well, I don't know. Let me see if my body resonates with it. If it doesn't resonate, I'm not taking it. And I'll just leave with, in the presence of love, the deepest breaths. We are at peace. There is no anxiety. There is no worry. There is no shame. There's just us in present, omnipresent, timeless now. And that we can live in wherever we go. It's what our gift is as humanity to bring to the world. And so I will leave with that. That's the third truth, is that where love is present, truth is going to come forth, resulting in our personal freedom.
I love that. I always say that we are love, truth, and light, and the truth will set us free. That's why it says the truth will set us free. If we can stand in our love, light, and truth, then we are being the observer without the judgment. So I love that. And there's one piece I love all three, by the way, but when you talked about anxiety, I've been dancing with anxiety since 2012. Didn't even know what it was until I experienced it. But I shared this in my class just last week. It's when I actually, because I always say when you're working with any psychological archetype, you can't kill it, you can't drown it, you can't strangle it, you've got to integrate it. You've got to see that there's a purpose. We gave birth to it, but for what purpose? And so I used anxiety as an example because I did the exercise. So what's the purpose of anxiety? The purpose of anxiety is for me to be able to take time out without feeling guilty. And then I went even a little bit deeper, asking, well, what is this anxiety protecting me from? It's protecting me from being vulnerable, asking for help. And then I thought, well, what's the secondary gain? Why am I hanging on to this anxiety? Because when people around me, my team, see me, getting anxious or having a panic attack or having another meltdown. I've only had two, by the way, since 2012, burnout, because of that. I'm a workaholic, people pleasing.
Yeah.
I'm a yes person.
Yeah.
That then they will help me. So the whole lesson in that was to ask for help and stand in being vulnerable, saying, you know what, I can't do it by myself.
That's right. That's right.
So I just wanted to share that because that was to me a bit of a game changer when I realized that I was stuck in this loop until I actually stopped and sat with it.
Yeah. It takes a lot of courage to ask for help.
Yes, absolutely. It does. Absolutely. Especially when you're a people pleaser. You don't want to put any more burden or weight on other people's shoulders. Like you said, suck it up, princess. You'll be right. You'll get through it. Yeah. Lucas, I can't thank you enough. You're an amazing human being. I love your energy. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that will reach out to you. So Lucas, we'll have everything in the show notes, but where do you hang out the most?
Thank you, by the way. Again, I hang out on Instagram a lot, podcast. Gordana and I just launched this course at undoyourpast.com. And we're spending a lot of time with that and with people. So people want to check that out, but I would love to support, talk to, encourage. The big thing is we're not alone. That's the main, when I say my podcast, my purpose of my podcast is just bringing people on and sharing stories so that everyone knows they're not alone. We're all walking this journey home. We're all walking ourselves home, as Ram Dass said. So it's such an honor. I really love your mission, your heart, the guests you have on your podcast. And I was like, man, it's so cool. I get to be on it and a part of it. And so I just want to say thank you.
You're so gorgeous. Bless you. And we're going to have Gordana on the show. Actually, we've had her, like, as we were speaking years ago. So we will have that in the show notes. And I know that everyone's going to love you when they listen to this message as much as I should say this interview, as much as I love you. I think you're amazing. Keep doing what you're doing. You're a beautiful soul. Thank you for your time, your energy, and your wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you.